Marco Rubio thought he was untouchable until Jasmine Crockett exposed secret payments, rigged contracts, and a shadow network that brought his career crashing down. It started with a lunch tray clatter in the Rayburn cafeteria and a sentence barely above a whisper, "He's got money in it." That's why they got the contracts. Jasmine Crockett didn't look up right away. She just took another sip of her tea and kept her eyes on the binder in front of her. But that sentence stuck. It was the kind of thing that floated around Capitol Hill more often than people cared to admit, half-truths, gossip, bitter aides blowing off steam. But something about the voice wasn't bitter. It was nervous. Later that afternoon, walking back to her office in the Longworth building, she couldn't let it go. Senator Marco Rubio's name had been coming up a lot lately in closed committee conversations. He'd been pushing defense proposals hard, too hard, some said. Bills that seemed to benefit the same two companies over and over again. A lot of nods, a lot of signatures, but not a lot of answers. She brought it up in passing to her chief of staff, Van Tiller, who had a knack for sniffing out the direction of political winds. "I heard that same thing last week," Van said, eyes flicking up from his laptop. "Something about him leaning on the Federal Acquisition Service. It's vague, though. Everyone's scared to say too much." Jasmine narrowed her eyes. Scared of what? Losing their job or worse? People protect their careers out here like it's their firstborn. Jasmine wasn't easily rattled. She had been underestimated too many times before. Being a black woman with a courtroom background and a steel trap memory made her a problem for people who relied on silence. By Thursday, she had 3 separate mentions from different staffers about Rubio's pipeline. A nickname for the recurring contracts quietly filtering through 2 Florida-based subcontractors with shaky public records and strange offshore holdings. Every time Jasmine asked for specifics, the answer was the same: ask the wrong question, and you'll get iced out. But Jasmine knew how to ask the right question in the wrong room and make people talk. That Friday, she walked into a closed committee review session on military procurement in room 2118 of the Rayburn House office building. She kept her comments neutral, asked sharp questions about pricing structures, and watched carefully when Rubio's name came up. 3 people wouldn't meet her eyes. One, a staffer in a blue checkered tie, got up and left mid-session. Back in her office, Jasmine stared at her whiteboard. She had names, arrows, dates, no proof yet, just a feeling, but her gut hadn't failed her yet. Then, just as she was packing up for the night, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She let it ring out. A minute later, a text popped up: "You're asking about the wrong people, but you're right. Be careful." She stared at the screen. For once, she didn't have a comeback. She showed it to Van, who raised his eyebrows but said nothing. By the next morning, another message came through: "Meet me near the bottom escalator in Union Station. I'll be wearing a navy windbreaker. Don't bring anyone." She didn't answer right away. She didn't want to look eager, but her mind was racing. If this was real, if someone on the inside was ready to talk, then the quiet rumors could be something much bigger. She walked over to the window. Outside, the Capitol lights flickered against the fog. People moved like normal: tourists, Hill staff, journalists chasing recycled headlines. But Jasmine felt it in her bones: something was off. Something real was buried beneath those whispers. And whoever had sent that message, they were scared. That meant something. She grabbed her coat and wrote a quick note on a yellow sticky pad for Van, Union Station. "Watch your phone. If I don't text in 45 minutes, call it in." She left the office without saying another word. But what she didn't know yet was that someone else was watching her, too. Union Station was busy as always, families dragging luggage, college kids glued to their phones, a few lobbyists trying to look casual. Jasmine walked in without hesitation, scanning without staring. She wasn't here for theatrics. She was here for answers. The bottom escalator near the food court was quieter. She stood to the side of the Dunkin' counter, pretending to check train times on her phone. Then she saw him, mid-30s, clean-shaven, navy windbreaker, just like the message said, hands shoved in his pockets, eyes darting. When he spotted her, he hesitated for just a second, then walked toward the stairwell next to the bookstore. Jasmine followed. They didn't speak until they were out of the main flow of traffic. He stopped, looked over his shoulder, and then faced her but didn't introduce himself. "You don't know me," he said quickly, voice low, shaky. "And I'm not doing this again. I just need this off me." He handed her a manila envelope, fat, sealed, taped. Jasmine didn't reach for it yet. "You worked for Rubio?" she asked. He nodded once. 5 years, legislative operations, then scheduling. "Why are you doing this now?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Because he's not who he says he is. And because someone needs to do something before this gets worse. I thought about going to a reporter, but that's suicide. They'll dig me up in a week. You ask the kind of questions that get things moving." Jasmine finally took the envelope. "What's in here?" "Money trails, email records, pressure points, some internal contractor memos. It's enough to show how deep he's tied in." He paused. "And names. You'll see names you won't believe. I just ask, protect my identity. Your name won't leave my lips unless you say so." He gave a weak smile, then glanced at his watch. "Be careful," he said, already turning to leave. "They don't come at you directly. They just ruin your life, one piece at a time." And just like that, he disappeared into the crowd. Back at her apartment, Jasmine locked the door, pulled the curtains, and sat at the dining table with the envelope in front of her. It felt heavy in her hands, not just the paper, but the weight of what it might mean. She opened it slowly. Inside were printed emails, screenshots, a USB drive, and photocopies of bank transactions between a PAC Rubio's team had quietly funneled money through and a shell company registered in Delaware. She'd seen this game before, layers built to hide just enough, but not everything. But it wasn't just financials. There were internal memos from contractors discussing Rubio's guy at the agency, and instructions to prioritize certain proposals, even when they didn't meet baseline security requirements. And then came the shocker, a transcript of a phone call, no names, just labels, SEN and agent. SEN, you know what needs to happen. They're the best choice. Make it happen. Agent, they're not even on the shortlist. SEN, don't make this difficult. You want my support on reallocation? Then do your job. Jasmine stared at the page. She read it twice, then again. It was vague enough to create doubt, but combined with the rest, it painted a clear picture of manipulation. She picked up her phone and called Van. "Get to my place now. Bring the portable scanner." 10 minutes later, Van arrived, still tying his hoodie string, holding a takeout container in one hand. "Jesus, Jazz, what is it?" he asked. She slid the envelope toward him. "Read." He did, slowly, quietly. His food went cold. "You know what this is?" he asked finally. She nodded. "A powder keg. Can you verify any of it?" "I will." They stayed up most of the night cross-referencing public records, FEC filings, LinkedIn job histories, and archive committee reports. Some of the connections were buried deep, but they were there. By 4:15 a.m., Van leaned back and exhaled hard. This isn't just bad optics. This is criminal. Jasmine didn't respond. She was staring at the list of names. Some were high-level aides, others part of the Office of Federal Procurement Policy, and one was a sitting member of the Senate Intelligence Committee. But the worst part wasn't what she had read. It was what she hadn't read yet on that USB drive. Jasmine didn't sleep that night. Neither did Van. They worked in shifts, eyes dry, fingers stiff from scrolling and typing. The USB drive held folders, neatly labeled, containing months of encrypted message logs, meeting itineraries, and digital bank statements linked to off-the-books consulting bonuses. It wasn't just Rubio anymore. There were at least 4 government officials indirectly connected to companies Rubio had championed during budget sessions. Some names weren't surprising. Others sent a chill down her spine, people she'd passed in the hallways, smiled at in briefings, even exchanged holiday cards with. And then there was CM, a name that kept popping up in internal chat logs between execs at Havenwell Dynamics, a mid-sized defense firm in Tampa. Always vague, always careful. CM says push the delivery through before oversight asks questions. CM wants a face-to-face with R before the next committee meeting. At 6:32 a.m., Van finally leaned back and let out a low whistle. "This is national-level dirty," he said. "And you're going to be walking straight into it." Jasmine nodded slowly, scrolling through one particularly damning email chain. They built this like a maze: intentional misdirection, fake LLCs, donations routed through education grants. It's smart, but not airtight. She paused at an email from a PAC director to a Rubio staffer, subject line, winter push. Inside, a short but pointed sentence: make sure the friendly faces at the agency clear the board before January. HWD can't lose that contract, not after all the grease. Van looked over her shoulder. "That's your smoking gun. And we're not even halfway through this mess." But before she could reply, her phone rang, unlisted number again. She answered, ready this time. "You got it," said the same voice from Union Station. "Good, but they're watching now. You're on a list. You need to be smart. What do you want from me?" Jasmine asked, not hiding her frustration. "Just truth. I gave you more than I ever planned to, but once it's out, you're on your own." "You think I'm scared of that?" He hesitated. "You should be." The line went dead. Jasmine's first instinct was to go public, leak it to a trusted outlet, force the conversation. But this needed more than headlines. If she rushed it, they'd spin it as rumor. The only way this stuck was through the right channels, the right timing, and airtight facts. She decided to loop in someone who owed her a favor. That afternoon, she met with Representative Lel Engram from Colorado Springs, a Republican with a track record for integrity and zero tolerance for backroom deals. They'd clashed on policy before but respected each other's methods. They met at a private lounge inside the Library of Congress, quiet, no cameras, off the radar. She laid it out in stages, first the documents, then the emails, then the audio transcript. Engram barely blinked. "This is real?" he asked after a long pause. "As real as it gets," Jasmine said. "And I need bipartisan support if I'm going to bring this forward without getting steamrolled." Engram scratched his chin, then looked her in the eye. "You're risking your whole career." She didn't flinch. "And what's it worth if I sit on this?" He nodded once. "You'll have my voice, and I'll bring 2 others who won't fold under pressure." Back in her office, Jasmine scanned every file, every page. Van prepared encrypted backups and stored them on separate drives. They knew they were being watched now. A black SUV had circled the block twice. A strange call came to the front desk, asking if Representative Crockett was traveling this weekend. They didn't panic, but they adjusted. Every copy was printed and hidden in different places. One went in a fireproof box in Van's cousin's garage in Bethesda. Another went with a trusted friend from law school in Pittsburgh. A third was mailed, sealed, certified, and lawyer-stamped, to a private investigative firm in San Diego with instructions to open only if Jasmine failed to make contact within 2 weeks. She wasn't naive. She knew how quickly people in D.C. could vanish, reputationally or literally. And yet, through all the tension, one thing stayed clear: this wasn't about a political win. It was about exposing rot. But the real test wasn't collecting the truth. It was deciding when to say it out loud. The next Monday broke gray and humid, but inside the Capitol, the air felt sharper than usual. Jasmine slipped through the side entrance before sunrise, carrying a leather folio packed with fresh printouts. Van tailed her, earbuds in, whisper reading a checklist of tasks: verify timestamps, cross-match wire transfers, prep encrypted thumb drive for secure drop. At 7:05 a.m., in a windowless conference room, Representative Lel Engram arrived with two colleagues he trusted. Beth Morales from Arizona and Colin Renner from Ohio. Both had served in uniform before politics and despised backdoor deals that put soldiers at risk. Jasmine opened with no ceremony. Rubio steered contracts worth $246 million to Havenwell Dynamics, she said, tapping a chart Van had color-coded through the night. He gained personally through Shell dividends traced to Shoreline Consulting in Delaware. The company is a ghost, but Rubio's sister-in-law sits on its board. Beth Morales set her coffee down so hard the lid popped. That's a crime scene, not a policy debate. Renner leaned forward. Proof stands, but process matters. Ethics will stall. Leadership will stall. We need public heat and procedural leverage at the same time. Engram agreed. We file an ethics complaint today, then request a joint oversight hearing. Meanwhile, we leak enough to force the press to chase. Jasmine shook her head. If the story drips, Rubio's team will build counternarratives. We drop everything in one controlled burst: documents, timelines, the staffer's testimony. Leave no room for spin. The room fell quiet until Van spoke. Then we pick a date and lock the doors behind us. Engram gave a slow tilt of his head. I'll line up signatures across party lines, but you'll feel pressure: phone calls after midnight, donors threatening primaries, committee chairs pulling your bills. Be ready. I didn't run for Congress to count favors, Jasmine replied. Outside, the first wave of pushback rolled in fast. A columnist at the Washington Review ran an op-ed hinting Crockett was weaponizing gossip for personal gain. Social media bots echoed the line within hours. A Florida radio host claimed she held a vendetta because Rubio once blocked her amendment on environmental funding. Jasmine's team documented every smear and traced several to a media firm, Vantage Vision, that had received payments from a Rubio-aligned PAC 2 weeks earlier. The dots kept linking themselves. That afternoon, Rubio's chief of staff, Patrick Moreno, cornered Van near the Cannon Tunnel. Your boss is walking into traffic, he murmured, barely moving his lips. Tell her she still has time to change lanes. Van stepped aside, meeting Moreno's gaze. We're not the ones playing chicken. That night, Jasmine's apartment lights flickered 3 times, then went dark. A technician from the power company showed up unannounced, citing a routine grid check. Van called the utility supervisor. No such work order existed. They switched to battery lanterns, copied files again, and kept going. On Wednesday, the Office of Inspector General acknowledged receipt of Jasmine's preliminary report. An hour later, a senior advisor to the Senate Armed Services Committee called Jasmine's cell. Some of your numbers don't add up, the voice said. Maybe hold your findings until we verify. She recognized the tone. Polite stalling meant to buy Rubio precious days. She answered plainly, verification is why I'm calling the hearing. Every door she opened revealed 2 more, but she refused to lose the thread. Van scheduled meetings with forensic accountants from the Congressional Research Service. Morales arranged a quiet sit-down with the ranking member of House Oversight, Trent Ellsworth, who agreed to fast-track witness protection for the whistleblower. Yet, threats kept shifting shape. A former donor pulled funding from Jasmine's district STEM program. Local radio in Dallas hinted at an FEC investigation into her own campaign, an accusation as thin as paper but enough to sow doubt back home. She recorded a short video message explaining the smear, posted it, and went back to work. Thursday evening, Engram called from his office overlooking Independence Avenue. I have the votes to demand an emergency hearing, he said, but Rubio's allies filed a motion to delay on procedural grounds. We're down to the wire. Jasmine rubbed her temples. File a countermotion citing imminent risk to national security procurement. Use the contractor emails that mentioned bypassing cybersecurity checks. Good angle. You ready for cameras? She exhaled. Born ready. As midnight crept up, Van handed her a final packet, testimony outline, source index, chain of custody log. Jasmine flipped through it, then closed it. But the moment she stepped into the closed ethics panel the next morning, she would learn the real fight hadn't even started. The hearing room was colder than usual, not in temperature, but in tone. It was just past 8 p.m., and the overhead lights buzzed faintly as the ethics panel filed in, their faces tight, unreadable. Cameras were barred. No media, just representatives, aides, legal observers, and the occasional political shark hiding behind a bored expression. Jasmine Crockett sat at the long table in the center, her back straight, a folder sealed with a red clip resting in front of her. Van stood along the wall, arms crossed, eyes sweeping the room like he was expecting something to blow. At the head of the panel sat Chairwoman Alida Fry, a polished centrist from Oregon, usually slow to act, always deliberate. Tonight, though, her lips were pressed tighter than usual. Representative Crockett, you may proceed, she said. Jasmine nodded. No preamble, no speech. She unclipped the folder and began handing out the documents, packet by packet, one for each panel member. These documents include transaction records, internal communications, procurement anomalies, and excerpts from a whistleblower statement implicating Senator Marco Rubio in direct interference with federal contract approvals, she said clearly, her voice calm but sharp. The room didn't breathe. She tapped the second page of the packet. This page outlines transfers between Shoreline Consulting and a series of subsidiary accounts tied to Havenwell Dynamics, dating back 17 months. Those transfers coincide almost exactly with Senate appropriations markups and scheduling of closed-door procurement briefings. A few panelists shifted in their seats. One, Representative Nolan Gray from Idaho, lifted the packet closer to his face, brow furrowing. She continued, Page 4 details communication logs. While encrypted, metadata confirms Rubio's office as the source IP for dozens of contacts with government officials at the Department of Defense Acquisition Office, some occurring outside official business hours. Chairwoman Fry interjected, Do you have verification on these logs? Jasmine didn't hesitate. Yes. Verified by an independent third party specializing in digital forensics. I've included their affidavit and methodology. Gray set his packet down. Are we expected to believe a sitting U.S. Senator has manipulated military contracts for personal enrichment? Jasmine looked him dead in the eye. You're not expected to believe anything until you read the documents, but you are expected to act once you do. No one spoke for a long while. Then Jasmine reached into her briefcase and pulled out a compact black speaker. This audio clip is a voice recording from a phone call between a senior executive at Havenwell Dynamics and a federal agency liaison. It was provided under whistleblower protection. I've redacted identifying markers pending further legal shielding. She pressed play. A man's voice crackled through, If Rubio says they're getting the deal, they're getting the deal. I don't care what the audit says. Make it happen, or we'll find someone else who will. The panel members stared at one another. Then Chairwoman Fry leaned forward, hands steepled. What are you asking this committee to do, Representative Crockett? I'm asking for a formal ethics investigation into Senator Rubio. I'm also requesting that this evidence be referred to the DOJ for independent review and that interim safeguards be placed on current and pending defense contracts involving Havenwell Dynamics. And what if we decline? Jasmine didn't blink. Then I'll walk out of this room and take it to the American people. Silence again. Then a voice from the back of the room, I second the motion for an ethics probe. It was Representative Morales. One by one, others followed: Engram, Renner, 2 Democrats, 1 Libertarian. Even Nolan Gray, after a long pause. The motion passed. Chairwoman Fry sat back in her chair and exhaled. Then it begins. Jasmine stood, collected her binder, and gave a short nod. Outside the chamber, Van was already texting updates. A reporter from the St. Louis Chronicle had caught wind of the late-night session and was circling like a hawk. Jasmine ignored the calls for now. As she and Van stepped into the hallway, Engram caught up to her. "You just lit a fuse," he said, keeping pace. "I didn't come here to watch things rot." He smiled. "Then you better be ready, because tomorrow morning, Washington won't look the same." But what none of them saw coming was just how fast that fuse would burn. By sunrise, it was already out. Somebody had leaked a fragment of the packet to a reporter at the Kansas City Ledger, not the full file, not even the audio, just one page. But that page had Rubio's initials, a suspicious wire transfer, and a timestamp linked to a secretive meeting in Tallahassee. It was enough. News stations scrambled. Cable hosts cleared their morning segments. Terms like contract rigging, fraud, and Rubio corruption probe filled lower thirds across every major channel. By 9 a.m., #RubioResign was trending nationwide. Jasmine watched from her office, arms crossed, Van pacing behind her. "Did you leak it?" she asked without looking. Van shook his head. "Nope, but whoever did wanted to light the fire early. Could be someone on the panel, maybe even Engram, to force the issue before the narrative got rewritten." It didn't matter anymore. The country was now paying attention. Outside the Capitol, protesters had started gathering. Some carried signs praising Jasmine. Others just wanted answers. Defense contractors were now under scrutiny, and so were the politicians who backed them. Rubio's office issued a flat statement before noon: "Senator Rubio has always acted in the interest of national security and the American taxpayer. Any implication otherwise is a partisan distraction. We will cooperate fully." It was too little, too late. Jasmine took a deep breath and agreed to appear live that evening on PBS NewsHour. She didn't grandstand. She didn't smile. She wore a navy blazer and kept her voice even. "I'm not here to punish anyone," she said. "I'm here to protect the integrity of the public trust. If people in power are abusing their positions to get rich while risking national security, we owe it to the people who elected us to stop it." The anchor leaned forward. "Are you afraid this could backfire? That the political system will close ranks to protect one of its own?" Jasmine didn't hesitate. "Then let them. We'll see how long they last under the weight of the truth." The clip went viral. That night, Van had to sift through hundreds of interview requests. Meanwhile, Rubio vanished, no appearances, no comments. His team offered vague explanations: travel, biomedical leave, security reassessment. But Capitol insiders knew the truth: his allies were scrambling. Jasmine's office line rang with a mix of hate and praise, threats from anonymous numbers, voicemails of support from voters in places she'd never even visited. Late that night, a man named Dwight Alton, a former procurement officer with the Defense Department, called Van from a burner phone. He said he had information about irregular briefings held by Rubio's office as far back as 2021. He was ready to talk, but only to Jasmine. They set a meeting for the next day in Fredericksburg, Virginia, neutral ground, out of the spotlight. But before Jasmine could leave the office, Van stepped in with a strange look on his face. "You're going to want to see this," he said. He handed her a printout of a new article just published. "Senator Rubio under formal investigation, facing possible expulsion." She read it twice. The panel didn't wait. Van said they voted to refer it to the Ethics Subcommittee and DOJ. "You shook the hill, Jazz, and now it's rolling." But Jasmine didn't celebrate. Not yet. Because she knew how fast Washington could change its tune. Support was real, but so was fear. People wanted to be on the right side of history, but they also wanted job security, donations, and soft landings. And the whispers had started again, not about Rubio this time, but about her. She's too ambitious. She wants his seat. She's dangerous. Jasmine stared out her office window, the Capitol dome glowing in the dark. They'll say I'm trying to build a brand, she said. Van shrugged. Let them talk. Truth doesn't need a PR team. But what they didn't know was that another name, someone higher up, was about to break through the surface, and it would make Rubio look small in comparison. The chamber was full, but quieter than usual. C-SPAN's live feed caught everything, the nervous tapping of pens, the silent stares exchanged across party lines, the way Rubio's name hung in the air like a question no one wanted to answer. A resolution had been drafted overnight by Chairwoman Fry, formally calling for the Senate to vote on Marco Rubio's expulsion. It hadn't happened in over a century. As Jasmine sat in the gallery above, surrounded by a few close aides and guarded by two plainclothes officers, she kept her hands clasped in her lap, no gloating, no smiles, just stillness. She'd done her part. Now the system had to decide whether it still worked. Down on the floor, Senator Reed Carlton from Michigan took the mic. Colleagues, he began, voice firm, this is not about politics. This is about betrayal, of process, of public trust, and of the very core of what we're supposed to stand for. The evidence is detailed, verified, and undeniable. If we ignore this, we tell every future official that personal profit is a justifiable cost of public service. There were a few quiet claps, a lot of folded arms. Senator Tyler Graves, a moderate from Iowa, stood next. None of us wants to be here, but the people we represent are watching. And if they see us protect our own at the expense of the truth, then maybe we don't deserve to be here at all. Then silence. Chairperson Merritt called for the roll. It took 6 minutes. When the final tally came through, 71 in favor of expulsion, 25 against, for abstaining, the room didn't erupt. It didn't cheer. It simply paused. Senator Marco Rubio was no longer a member of the United States Senate. He wasn't in the room to hear it. No one knew where he was. Back in her office, Jasmine watched the announcement stream across 3 networks at once. Van handed her a cup of black coffee and sat across from her, arms resting on his knees. You did it, he said quietly. No, we did what we were supposed to, she replied. She hadn't eaten all day, but food could wait. The real weight wasn't the vote. It was what came next, the hearings, the investigations, the ones who helped him, the ones still hiding. As she scrolled through her inbox, a name stood out, CM. There it was again, this time in the subject line of a leaked internal memo from Havenwell's legal counsel, prepare briefing for CM, possible liability exposure if Crockett presses forward with Phase 2. Van leaned over her shoulder. You still haven't figured out who that is? She shook her head. But they're scared of him. Whoever CM is, they were higher up the chain than Rubio. He took orders. They stared at the screen in silence. Then Jasmine picked up her phone and called Engram. We're not done, she said. I need authorization to continue tracing the money. We missed someone. Then we keep going, Engram answered. But you know what this means, right? Jasmine sighed. They're going to come for me harder now. He didn't disagree. As the sun dipped low, protesters gathered outside once again, but this time not for Rubio. Some chanted her name. Some held signs that read, "Truth still matters." Others just stood quietly, holding up pictures of veterans, teachers, and small business owners, people who suffered when corrupt money lined the wrong pockets. One man approached Jasmine's car as she left the Capitol. Security blocked him, but she rolled her window down. He looked about 60, wore a mechanic's uniform, eyes tired but kind. I don't know how politics works, he said. But you did something real. My brother served 2 tours overseas. If even one contract got filled with bad armor to make some guy rich, thank you for stopping that. Jasmine didn't respond right away. She just nodded once and thanked him. She got home late. Van stayed on the phone with Engram, coordinating the next steps. Jasmine sat at her dining table again, the same one where she first opened that manila envelope. Only now, it was buried under folders, thumb drives, and legal pads filled with names. But somewhere among those names, she knew, was the real power, the one who never signed anything, never made a call directly, just whispered instructions and moved pieces from the shadows. And Jasmine was getting closer. 2 days after the vote, the Senate chamber still felt shaken. Rubio's name had been removed from office placards, staff badges invalidated, files seized by federal agents. For some, the news cycle was already moving on. But Jasmine wasn't finished. In fact, she was only now stepping into the storm. The whistleblower, the man in the Navy windbreaker, finally agreed to testify under oath. His real name was Elias Breener, 39 years old, former deputy scheduler and procurement liaison for Rubio's office. For years, he had watched deals being passed like poker chips, emails deleted before backups could catch them, meetings held in parking garages instead of conference rooms. But guilt eats away in layers. Sitting across from Jasmine and Engram in a secured briefing room at the Capitol, Elias looked smaller than she remembered, hollow cheeks, eyes that didn't blink enough. I never thought I'd make it this far alive, he said, voice barely above a whisper. We've got you, Jasmine told him. But we need everything. Who is CM? He paused. CM isn't a single person. It's a code used internally. It started showing up in 2019 after Rubio took a private meeting with an executive from Fairstone Holdings. Jasmine furrowed her brow. Fairstone, the conglomerate out of Phoenix. Exactly. Fairstone is the shell, but beneath it, it's run by Calvin Marin. The name clicked like a dropped hammer. Calvin Marin, former intelligence contractor turned venture investor, known for slipping through congressional oversight hearings with slick answers and no trail. He'd never held office, never needed to. He controlled data, surveillance, and private security firms embedded in nearly every government department. You're telling me Marin was Rubio's handler? No, Elias said. I'm saying Marin was running his own game. Rubio was just the tool. Jasmine leaned back. The room went quiet. They had been so focused on the senator, they hadn't looked beyond the hill. Van burst in 5 minutes later, holding a manila folder, his face pale. We got a problem. He threw the file down on the table. Inside were screenshots of a smear campaign already in motion. Paid articles across smaller online outlets were accusing Jasmine of political retaliation, manufactured evidence, even suggesting she had personal ties to Havenwell's competitors. They're trying to flip the story, Van said. And guess who owns 3 of these media sites? Calvin Marin, Jasmine muttered. Elias spoke again. That's how it works. Marin never shows up. He just owns the room you're standing in. It didn't take long. The next morning, Jasmine's inbox was flooded. Reporters asking about fake donations, a fake website with doctored screenshots of wire transfers to her old law firm, a TV pundit accusing her of being a plant for the defense lobby. All lies, all fast. But Jasmine stood tall. She posted a video from her office, no makeup, no filters, just her and her voice. They're trying to bury the truth under noise. But noise doesn't change facts. If you want to know who's really scared right now, look at who's paying to discredit the messenger. The video was shared over 3 million times in 12 hours. That afternoon, Engram and Morales returned to her office. DOJ's in, Engram said. They're opening a formal investigation into Marin's companies, and they want access to your files. Jasmine nodded. Give them everything. I don't want this locked in some subcommittee. I want people to see what unchecked influence looks like. That night, something happened that didn't surprise her but still stung. A longtime ally, Congressman Jasmine, went on national radio and called Jasmine's investigation a dangerous overreach. He's scared of what else is in those files, Van said. He was on one of the oversight subcommittees in 2020. If Marin had him, too. Jasmine didn't finish the thought. She didn't need to. The next morning, Jasmine walked into the Oversight Committee hearing room and saw Calvin Marin sitting at the end of the table, perfect suit, silver cufflinks, calm eyes. No press allowed, just lawmakers and lawyers. He stood when she entered. "Representative Crockett," he said smoothly, "you've stirred quite the reaction." She didn't shake his hand. "I'm not here to stir. I'm here to clean." They sat. Questions began. And Jasmine realized something quickly: Marin was rehearsed, polished. He spoke without a single note, never admitted, never denied. But behind his cool gaze, she saw it, fear. Not loud, but present. Like someone who realized, maybe too late, that this time the wrong person had pulled the string. But Jasmine wasn't going to stop at fear. She was aiming for the truth. And she was closer than ever. The hearing with Calvin Marin didn't end with a bang. It ended with a warning. After 3 hours of carefully worded answers, misdirection, and just enough deniability to dance around perjury, Marin was dismissed. But not before Jasmine asked him one final question. "Mr. Marin," she said, her tone steady, "in your view, should unelected individuals with private business interests have influence over national defense contracts?" He smiled slightly, folding his hands on the table. "In my view, Representative, efficiency often requires unconventional partnerships." The room didn't react, but the message was clear. Back in her office, Jasmine sat with Van, Morales, and a DOJ investigator named Camille Wren, who had flown in from California. She was sharp, early 40s, clipped tone, no time for small talk. "You've disrupted something larger than any of us imagined," Camille said. "We've now got leads tying Marin's holdings to procurement procedures in at least 5 other states, small towns, county defense boards, quiet money flows. This isn't just a Washington problem." Jasmine looked at her notes. "It's a national infection, but infections fight back." The next morning, 2 websites tied to Jasmine's campaign were hit with a coordinated cyber attack. Donations halted, staff emails leaked. Old legal cases from her defense attorney days, cases already closed and filed, were dug up and fed to right-wing tabloids with twisted headlines. She defended a man accused of assault in 2012. She represented a whistleblower who later vanished. She's anti-military. None of it stuck, but the goal wasn't to make it stick. It was to make people doubt, even for a moment. Van paced her office, phone in hand, scrolling. "They're trying to drag your name through mud until people forget what this was even about," he said. "Death by distortion." Meanwhile, the whistleblower, Elias Breener, was placed into protective custody under DOJ orders. A second witness came forward anonymously, this time, a former IT contractor from Marin's cybersecurity firm, claiming files had been wiped clean days before the ethics panel hearing. "Too clean," he said in his video affidavit. "They erased the servers like they knew what was coming. That doesn't happen unless someone inside tipped them off." At that, Jasmine froze. Someone inside, not just Congress, but her team, the staffers they trusted. Someone had fed Marin's camp. It explained the leaks, the fake screenshots, the timing. She brought Van and Morales into her conference room and closed the door. "We've got a leak," she said flatly. They reviewed every email log, internal message, and meeting note from the last 3 weeks. 2 aides had access to the files. One had worked with her since the campaign. The other, Matthew Cord, had been recommended by a mutual contact in the Transportation Committee, quiet, smart, always early, too early. He was gone by the next morning, left a note claiming a family emergency, took his badge, and erased his hard drive. He was a plant, Van said, throwing the folder on the table. They knew we'd get close, so they slipped in a fail-safe, but they were too late. The files had already been copied. The chain of evidence was intact. DOJ secured it all. Still, Jasmine couldn't shake the feeling that someone else, someone higher, was waiting for the heat to die down before resurfacing. Marin had looked calm during questioning, but he wasn't the type to go down quietly. He was the type who bet on time and short memories. So Jasmine sped things up. She scheduled a public town hall in Dallas. No fancy setup, folding chairs, a handheld mic, no teleprompter, just her face-to-face with the people who put her in office. A retired army captain stood up. "I watched what you did. They're trying to bury you now. What happens next?" Jasmine met his eyes. "We keep pulling," she said. "We don't stop just because it gets uncomfortable. The ones who rigged the system are betting we'll get tired, but they haven't met the people I represent." That line made the local news, then the national. Suddenly, she was back in control of the story, not as a political fighter, but as a representative of regular people, working people, the ones who served, sacrificed, and never saw a cent of the corruption now splashed across headlines. But Jasmine knew this wasn't the end. Marin still had strings to pull, and she wasn't done cutting them. The school wasn't much, brick exterior, a few chipped steps, and a playground half covered in chalk drawings. But when Jasmine Crockett stepped through the double doors of Winslow Elementary in Denton, Texas, the room erupted like she was the first person in Congress to ever bother showing up. The town hall was over. The national press had already moved on to some new scandal. But here, inside this third-grade classroom filled with bean bags, posters, and sticky-fingered kids, was the reason she had fought so hard in the first place. She'd been invited by Mrs. Delaney, a teacher who had written her a letter after the Rubio vote. Jasmine hadn't planned on accepting, too much risk, too little time. But something about the handwriting, careful, rounded, written in blue ink, stuck with her. And when things get loud in D.C., sometimes you need to remember why you ever opened your mouth at all. Mrs. Delaney had a question and answer circle set up with 20 kids sitting crisscross on a big checkered rug. Jasmine sat with them, knees creaking a little, smiling at their wide eyes and curious silence. Then one girl, small, with hair in 2 puffballs, raised her hand. "Are you scared of the people who lied?" Jasmine didn't answer right away. "I used to be," she said finally. "But not anymore, because truth isn't something you carry alone. When you say it out loud, other people start saying it, too. And then it gets bigger than the people trying to hide it." The girl smiled. "I'm going to tell the truth even when it's hard." Jasmine nodded. "That's where it starts." Outside, the sun was setting over the parking lot. Van waited near the car, scrolling headlines. Marin had just been subpoenaed again, this time by the DOJ. A deeper investigation was underway, not just into Marin's businesses, but into campaign finance webs that reached into 8 states and possibly 2 foreign accounts. "What now?" Van asked as she slid into the passenger seat. "We don't let up," Jasmine said. "We build a firewall. We make sure the next person who tries this knows the risk's not worth it." He smirked. "You ever going to take a break?" She looked out the window. "When the job's done." Back in D.C., the conversation had changed. Ethics reform was no longer a footnote, it was front-page news. A bipartisan group led by Engram and Morales drafted the Public Trust and Procurement Act, aimed at closing the loopholes Rubio had slipped through. Jasmine co-authored 3 sections, including a clause that required financial disclosure for indirect family holdings. She wasn't just cleaning up a mess. She was rewriting the rules. Late one night, after another long committee review, Jasmine returned home and found an envelope slid under her door. No return address, just a single sheet of paper inside. You didn't just change the game. You reminded people why it matters. She didn't recognize the handwriting. Could have been a staffer. Could have been a constituent. It didn't matter. The next day, she hung it on the wall behind her desk. Weeks later, she visited Elias Breener, who was now living under a new identity with the help of the DOJ. They met at a small lake in Vermont on a bench by the water, no reporters, no security detail, just two people who had risked everything to pull something dark into the light. "You think it's really over?" he asked. Jasmine shook her head. "No, but it's quieter, and people are watching now." Elias stared at the water. "I thought I'd regret it, giving all that up." "You didn't," she said. "You just got tired of pretending you didn't see it." He smiled for the first time in months. That night, Jasmine flew back to Texas, walking through the airport without a single flashbulb, no interviews, no distractions, just purpose. Because the real work wasn't just about Rubio or Marin or a contract gone wrong. It was about trust, how easily it breaks, and how much harder it is to rebuild. She didn't want statues or sound bites. She wanted people to look at government and see themselves again. Not shadows of greed wearing polished smiles. Before she went to bed, she wrote a note in her journal: "Truth doesn't shout. It waits. And when it's finally heard, it doesn't leave." If you believe the truth still matters, subscribe to our channel. New stories every week that remind us what integrity looks like and why it still counts.